Good. Yes. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2. Yes, episode 2. Last time we were together, it was kind of a trick, I would say. No, this is episode 2 of Two Guys, a Girl, and a Scene. It's a new show from the GWW Radio Network, where we're going to discuss 3 times a month. First episode will be our top 5 something, favorite movies of all time, like last time. Favorite TV shows, whatever, top 5 something, to give you guys a list of something to kind of go on as to what you want to binge next. Tonight, it's the October issues episode where we're going to talk about, continuing from last week, our top 5 films. We're going to talk about some issues that came up from last week that, such thing as experience. How would we experience a movie going in? What are our influences going into a movie? What are the superhero, what's going on with the superhero genre? Is it going to really die like the Western? Stuff like that. That's what we're going to really be talking about. But can't do it alone. Like we said, there's 2 guys, so we're going to start and introduce my main man, Agaskles. We've been doing this for a while with Spoilercast, and now it's an actual show. What do you think about that?
Come get some of this! Boom! What's going on, everybody?
Yeah.
How are you guys doing?
Thanks for being here. I'm glad we got this going. This is really exciting. It was the first time that I've been excited for a podcast, to be honest.
Wow.
I don't know if I should reveal that. All right, bye. Anyway, so the girl here. Come on, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. I'm not going to call you a TV expert.
Here.
Or movie expert, whatever
Well,
Casey said. Yeah. That'll end.
Yeah, I never quote Casey. It doesn't end well. No, don't do it.
So what do you think about this new show?
I'm excited because this is a show that we get to talk about film primarily, with a little bit of TV because we can't help ourselves, and I get to chat with both of you, and you guys are fun, and I'm excited, and so let's get this scene together.
Yes.
Let me ask you guys, because it sounds like,
yeah.
Is this the podcast that you were born to be on?
It sounds like
is this the show you've been waiting to be on all of your lives?
Quite possibly. I don't know.
Are we old enough to answer that question? I'm
That's
just
like
curious.
A question, like when the show ends. Like, you gotta answer that. Wow, that's deep. Anyway, let's get started. Let's start with, last week we spoke about the top 5 films of 2015 so far. Now, what was the formula for you guys when you were thinking about, okay, these are my top 5, and then, I'm going to leave these few out? So, Sarah, I'll start with you.
My formula was basically, first, what did I actually watch that was released in 2015, and then what do I remember watching? And the ones that I forgot, and it took me a few more extra minutes to remember watching, those are the ones that got left off of my list, and there were very few, but that was basically my formula.
Cool. Gassica?
So mine was maybe a little similar, maybe a little different. So I started by, so I went to a website that had a list of all the films that had been released in 2015. And I went down and just chronologically listed the ones that I had seen. And then, then I kind of quickly grabbed the ones that I felt should be in my top 5. And then I started shuffling them. I did a few tiebreakers, especially for that 5th slot. There were some that I immediately took, and I was like, well, those aren't in the top 5. And actually, when I did my list, we were actually talking about it being a top 10. So
yeah.
So I actually I think I ranked every movie that I had seen in 2015, and then kind of tweaked the top 5. I guess the one difference is, and we talked about this a little bit on the top 5 show itself. The thing Sarah mentioned about, hey, if I don't remember it probably wasn't one of my favorite films. And my only slight different variation on that, because I've experienced this a lot with a lot of different content areas that I've been a reviewer for at one point or another, I try to make that master list of everything that I've consumed, because a lot of times I'll forget something simply because I never got a chance to talk to anybody about it. So that would be maybe the only difference.
Gotcha. For me, it was very simple. I just kind of pulled up a list of the movies that came out this year and looked through all of them and just kind of marked off which ones I've seen. And then I went and looked at all the ones I've seen and said, okay, which one was the most, what do I remember the most? What was the best experience for me? What has stayed with me through the year? That's kind of what I did. And obviously mine that has stayed with me since literally the beginning of the year is Kingsman, which came out in February. So that, I always look for that one that has kind of like that staying power. And that's kind of how I did it. And that'll keep going on as the year goes on and more movies come out. But that's basically how I did it. Yeah, against
let me ask you guys, because
yeah.
I guess the next layer of the onion on this is just kind of gets into the review or scoring process itself. What's kind of your guys' rubric for the ranking, or even for movie reviews? Like each week, because I do comic reviews for the site also, and and each week when I read like my stack of books, I score them as I read them. But once I've read, say if I'm reading 10 comics in a week, once I get to that third, fourth, or fifth comic, it starts becoming, I'm like, is this a 7 or is it a 7.5? And one of the things is I look at the other things that I've graded and I go, now ask yourself, was it better than that book? Ask yourself, was the art as good as that book? And for comics, I kind of have a definite rubric, right? I have, was there a major reveal? Okay, so that puts it a certain place on the scale. Was there a guest appearance?
Right.
Was the writing, particularly poignant? So there are these kind of tick marks that I go through, and I probably have the same thing for movies as well. I can't articulate them as succinctly, but kind of.
Right. When I've been writing TV recaps for the site now, and my process is no episode is ever going to get a 10. First of all, I mean that's perfection, and I mean if it's worthy of it, it will. But I highly doubt that because I don't think any episode is ever truly perfect. And so knowing that that's off the table, then the highest for me is always a 9 or a 9.5. But I was told we weren't allowed to do decimal points. I need to check with some people about that because I've seen decimal points and I'm kind of pissed off about that. But anyways, this is an issue show, right?
So that's definitely an issue.
It really is.
Okay.
I'm not saying, I'm just saying I have a problem with it. And so then the highest would be a 9. And what's hard about that is because I also don't want to say, oh, this episode was good in terms of this series. Like, for an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., oh, that's a pretty good Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode, so you rated a 9 rather than, I mean, it really deserves like a 7 or an 8, if that. So that's kind of how I do those kind of scorings. What about you, John?
I gotta say, I mainly do movies, and when I watch a movie, I kind of weird to explain it, but I kind of see how I feel, like what kind of an experience I have with the film. How does it make me feel? Does it make me feel like I have to run out of the room, stop watching it immediately? Am I enjoying it? Am I drawn in? That's the one thing I look at first. And then one of my number one things that I always look for is performance from each actor. Who stands out? Who doesn't? I always look for really top-notch performances because that drives the film. And then I like sound design, really good sound design. So when it has something like that, or if it doesn't, just really good editing, like film editing. When it's cut well, I like to look at like all the technical stuff in a movie, and it takes a lot for me to give anything above a 9. That is like masterpiece area for me. Eight. I'm more comfortable with the 8 range, where an 8 for me is a good to great movie. 8.5 is like a great, and then 9 and 10, those are just really, really good. A really bad score for me would be a 6. But yeah, that's kind of how I kind of look at it when I'm sitting down with a movie. Um, but yeah, so I guess this could kind of lead into our like what influences our viewing of things. Um, Gasicles, what are some things that may influence you before you go in? It could be maybe a show that you're kind of watching along another one. Um, for example, I know for me over the summer I was watching Hannibal and Penny Dreadful, two kind of similar in types of tone, but I would always be blown away by Hannibal's writing, performance, visuals. And then I would go to Penny Dreadful, it would have similar things, and it was just so hard to kind of review Penny Dreadful from the standpoint that that you're just so enamored with that world that you're surrounded by for such a period of time for me personally. Um, and then there's some other shows that other podcasts talk about that I'm not going to bring up. But go ahead.
Yeah, so this came up off the top 5 show, initially at least as a matter of, when people hype you up on something, right, and then you go see it and it's not that great and you're disappointed, that can sometimes impact the experience I'm having as I'm viewing it to a certain extent, and as I reflect on it, it's probably to a lesser extent than I feel. I will definitely say, because I kind of go through this rubric whenever I review and score something, I don't necessarily feel like it impacts the review score that I give something. I think I have other things that kind of carry me away from that influence. I will say there's kind of a, one of the influences, if you will, is kind of my own internal emotion, and I kind of go through it the way I go through a meal and giving a waitress or waiter a tip, meaning, and you kind of alluded to it too, Jonathan. There's one of the first places I gauge how I feel about a film is in the experience, right? Is while I'm watching the film, how do I feel? And then the second checkpoint is, as the credits are rolling, how do I feel? Because there have definitely been movies that are doing one thing when I'm in it, and then do something at the end to either ruin that or stick the landing or whatever. Yeah. And so there's this 5-minute period, kind of as I'm watching the credits roll and walking out of the theater, that inform the way that I feel about a movie. And you and I have talked about this aspect, and then I always tend to give it a day to maybe 3 days before I actually really want to write the review. Sometimes I write it the same day, but generally I prefer to give it a couple days, because there's just definitely, how do I feel about the movie as I'm moving further past it. And in a lot of cases, I walk out of a movie feeling one way, and in 24 to 48 hours, I feel I'm in a different scoring bracket. But probably the biggest outside influence is how the film is how the film's marketed. What that marketing team does to me before I go into the film, whether they set me up to have one perception or set me up to have a different perception, and then whether or not those expectations are met. So, I'll readily admit, a film that I walk into with low expectations, and the expectations are low because either I have a low opinion of the actors, I have a low projection of the chemistry that they're going to be able to generate, or the film was so low budget that I don't have a demand or an expectation for it to achieve that much. And when I walk into the film and the film actually exceeds, whatever point on a yardstick those 3 factors would put them at, then that tends to influence me to feel better about the film.
Yeah, and before you answer, Sarah, I want to change up the question a little bit for you, a little bit. Experience, influence, all, I want you to address those, but think about this too. What makes a movie or a TV show like your favorite of all time? We kind of designate certain ones. It's obviously got to be something that you've seen multiple times, not something that you just say, oh, I've seen once, I sat down, it's amazing, great. That's like the instant thing you get from something. But for example, and I hope we talk about this movie in the coming weeks and however with the podcast. My favorite film of all time for years now has been V for Vendetta, and every time I sit down with that movie, it's different every single time. And I think for me, that's what makes the experience of something. But then I also think of Interstellar last year. I saw that in IMAX. I've only seen it once, and I still think very fondly of the film, but I haven't gone back to it. I have it on Blu-ray, but the experience in IMAX was incredible. So kind of like feeding off of that, how do you view that that distinction and just the experience and influences in general for yourself?
It's an interesting distinction because I go through that too, where there are movies that I own that I have seen far too many times. And I've seen them so many times because I became obsessed with them. Like, some of my favorite movies of all time are like movies like Love Actually and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and those I found myself rewatching on a regular basis, then having to watch them with my friends and family, and just every time I watched them, I learned more and more about the film and just certain smaller details that were included. And so, yeah, those types of movies really stand out to me as my personal favorites. Then again, there are movies that I adore that I've only seen a few times because I don't want to ruin it, because I've also realized over the years, the more you watch it, or for me at least, the more I watch the movie, the more it becomes also kind of repetitive, and I learn it almost too well, where I start to, the benefits of rewatching and seeing those smaller details, they start to subtract, and where you're just like, oh, I've seen it 1,000 times, I know it by heart now, so it's done. But yeah, so I get where that's coming from. The big thing for me right now is what I'm finding really interesting is in terms of social media and YouTube channels with a lot more coverage of film and TV media, we have all of a sudden all this knowledge about projects that are going on. So there's a lot more build-up to movies or TV shows where you go into the first couple episodes of a season and you feel like you've already mapped out the arcs, and it's not until like later on when you start to see things you didn't expect to see, didn't anticipate, and that's where really the good storytelling comes. Or at least that's what I'm starting to figure out right now, at least. So.
Yeah. I want to stay with the idea of experience with you guys, because I've mentioned briefly Interstellar, how I've seen it once, and the experience at the theater in IMAX was incredible, but haven't had the chance to sit down with it here at home, and I wonder if that'll change my views on the film. I know in the rundown you put together, you mentioned Age of Ultron. I've only seen that one once as well. It's fantastic visually in the theater, but I wonder if you see it again at home and it's kind of downsized, does it change the size and scope that these type of films are kind of made out to be, these grand scale, theatrical experiences that are meant to be like a Godzilla that kind of shrinks itself? So, talk about that for a minute there.
There's definitely something different in it, and something different beyond, I think, I don't want to say obvious because I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but there are kind of some automatic things that you think about get changed in the experience of watching it on a smaller screen at home. And watching Age of Ultron, in conjunction with also having recorded the first episode with you guys, because I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something Sarah said about Age of Ultron, because that was fifth on your list, right, Sarah?
Right, yeah.
Right. And I think it was something you mentioned about the action scenes, the big battle action scenes, and I believe you mentioned not liking them because they were just overly bombastic and frenetic and difficult to kind of digest during the movie. And I was, of course, in the back of my mind as I was going through my second viewing, and of course, what I did, in particular, the fight, I call it the last stand at the OK Corps, not Corral, because there's that scene where they're all surrounding the core,
right.
they're really kind of together as that team of Avengers, right? Because Quicksilver, Quicksilver is there, and Scarlet Witch is kind of, Scarlet Witch has gone through the Jeremy Renner speech, awesome speech, by the way, and she's, they've kind of officially made their stand as Avengers, and all I can remember from that when I saw it in the movie was that all of the Avengers were defending the core against Ultron. That was pretty much it. When I was at home, I watched it. I could see it in a lot more detail. I was watching it on like a 12-inch. I shouldn't say 12-inch. I was watching it on like a 23-inch monitor from a PC, and I picked up on a lot more of the detail. But I also stopped it at certain points and was like, "Oh, whoa, what did he just do?" And back and tracked back and rewatched. And the same thing with a lot of the lines and a lot of the speeches. Like I listened to that Jeremy Renner speech. When he's huddled with Scarlet Witch in one of the bombed out houses, and he's like, we're on a city that's flying, and I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes any sense, So that and a lot of the Captain America speeches, which I love. So it's a different experience, and there are times that I've thought that it's detracted. The obvious thing is you go, oh, well, I need to see that movie on the big screen because it's a big action flick. But I found this time it was actually more effective seeing it, at least for a second viewing, on a smaller screen.
Yeah. Sarah, I know you've mentioned a couple of things in terms of experience before about, personally, but what do you think about that theater and at home difference?
I think it's I actually would think that it's growing, the difference.
Yeah.
I almost feel like movies are starting to be made for theater experiences versus at home. Recently, I saw Gravity for the first time, and I never saw it on the big screen. But when I watched it on my little Mac laptop, I thought it was really boring. But then again, I had a bunch of high expectations because everybody told me how good it was. But I truly believe that was made to be seen on the big screen and not on a laptop. And if you watch that on your laptop, it's not as well made and it's not good because you don't get the same experience or the same feeling. I mean, it's a survival story, but it doesn't have that epic scale that it would have had if I had watched it on the big screen.
Yeah, that kind of goes into what I wanted to talk about next. Is like another thing on our rundown is we're constantly on the go nowadays. We have short attention span. If it doesn't work for us, we're going to move on to something else immediately. Netflix, we can consume whatever we want immediately. We watch episode after episode. I noticed the gas because you had Daredevil listed. That show, thinking about it, hearing about people talk about it, I don't think that show would work on a local television network 22-episode season. It is a 13-hour movie, pretty much, just what people have kind of put it to. And yeah, that's probably cliche saying that now on Netflix, but how does that? Is it because of the distractions of being at home and hey, look, we can watch this on, like you said, your MacBook, or I watch most of my stuff on my tablet now. How does that affect your work as a person covering the stuff? Like when you do your recaps each week, how do you notice that affecting you instead of DVRing and then going on Netflix and watching something? Sarah, I want to get your feedback on this because you do it quite often, especially with The Good Wife and all the other shows.
Yeah, I signed myself up for a lot, apparently. I'm just glutton for punishment. How do I answer that question? I think it's harder to cover shows that are released on Netflix because covering shows, you want to be timely about it. And unfortunately, my recaps get delayed a day because I don't own a TV, so I can't watch them in a timely manner and then write about them. So there's always at least a day or two delay for my recaps. But as a viewer, I love having the ability to binge watch things. I think that's a way that TV and seasons are meant to be watched. and I love it. And I don't think it's a new concept because if you go back and watch The Wire, which is an amazing show, and if you love TV, that's a show you should really watch if you want to get a good idea about just drama and compelling writing and universe building. And that show is structured season by season. And each season can stand alone, but when they're back to back, they're interwoven and they create this tapestry, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's great. So, and I think that now we have Netflix and Amazon, which are producing original content and allowing viewers to watch these things back to back, or a whole season in a day. Who's done that? Once or twice. I think it's great. At the same time, there are negatives. You mentioned Hannibal earlier.
Yeah.
I kind of binged the first 2 seasons, but with that show, I had to take breaks just because that show is so dense and so scary and creepy that I couldn't. Yeah, I could not watch that show back to back. So I went 2 episodes a night to get through it.
Yeah, Hannibal's interesting because it's one of those shows that it was kind of set up to fail in a way. It's amazing it lasted 3 seasons because of, like you said, how dense it is. It is so. It's written so in such a complex way that most viewers will not know how to follow that. But that's for another time. but yeah, I agree. I really don't know which way I prefer. I mean, there's so much stuff on now that it doesn't feel like you're not binging. It really doesn't, because I'll set Gotham, Flash, Scream Queens, all these shows to record, and then I have other shows that I'm binge watching on the side on Netflix, like a Clone Wars or a Blunt Talk that I'll just catch online after it's aired. And by the time you get up to these shows, you're really binging, because I still haven't seen shows that must not be named yet from this week, and by the time I watch them, Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be here already. So it's just like, it's amazing. So I wanted to kind of flip the question around on you, basically. From the way I'm seeing it, I don't feel like I'm not binging, even though I'm still watching television regularly and in the Netflix sense as well. How do you view things, and how does it compare to the way Sarah and I kind of consume this stuff now? Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So I guess the question is, right now it's kind of vectored mainly around binge watching. I think binge watching in general, if you have an opportunity to do it, is a great way to consume and experience a show that you've missed. And I'll say, binge watching season 1 and 2 and half of season 3 of Arrow was one type of experience that is starkly different from watching it week to week. And probably for the types of shows that I like, that's probably true for all of those. They all become kind of like you said, Jonathan. They all become like 13-hour movies. Instead of being these singular pieces of episodic content. It works particularly well for shows that are written in a kind of Whedon-esque format, in the way he wrote Angel, where a season of Angel is one long singular story. In fact, all 5 of those seasons is one large, huge, epic story with strong currents of themes that run from beginning to end. So binge watching is good in that way. And I'll say, when I binge watch something, it tends to stick with me a lot more. It tends to have a lot more definition in my head. then I'm quite certain. So this is my first season on board for all of. I think it's okay if we name the shows if we don't get into too much detail.
I'm just being really funny.
No, I know.
Such a comedian. No, okay.
This is my first season being on board from the very beginning for Arrow and The Flash, and I'm quite certain that by the time I'm sitting around waiting for the mid-season, when we get past the mid-season finale and we're sitting around on the break waiting for the mid-season premiere, I'm sure there are going to be things that I've forgotten, and I'll, I'd like to go back and watch them. I don't know if the streaming services will allow you to. So that'll be a thing, right? It's an aspect of the experience that's different.
Right. Well, it's time to talk Oscar bait and money. I don't know if that worked, but I tried it.
I heard it.
That's an homage to Everett Harn. Anyway, so I want to talk some Oscar movies and some blockbusters and things like that. So I got some homework from our Gassicles here. I've done this before for the spoiler cast as well. I like to do this. I like looking up money and box office numbers. But anyway, I will shut up. So the top 3 movies, money-wise, of 2014, I'm going to go 3 to 1. Guardians of the Galaxy was number 3 with $333 million, and it was nominated for Best Achievement in Makeup and Hairstyling and Best Achievement in Visual Effects at the Oscars. Number 2 was The Hunger Games. Yeah, go ahead.
But no Oscar wins.
No Oscar wins, correct.
Right. So just to clarify for what Jonathan's walking through, and the reason we're talking about this is it's looking at this comparison of blockbuster movies and how much they earned, and the fact that they tend to come out in the summer, and how many Oscar wins they get, nominations and wins, versus the Oscar-winning movies and how much they tend to gross coming out in the fall and winter time period. So $330 million, 2 Oscar nominations, no Oscar wins.
Yep, exactly. Number 2 is The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1, $337 million, no nominations, and obviously no wins at the Oscars, which is interesting, especially with Jennifer Lawrence headlining and pretty solid cast. But anyway, we'll have a larger discussion about all these in a moment. But number 1, American Sniper, $350 million. It won Best Achievement in Sound Editing at the Oscars, and it was nominated for Best Motion Picture of the Year, Best Performance by an Actor in a Lead Role for Bradley Cooper. Now, the Oscar, the big Oscar winners and how much they made, it's a much different look at, and we'll get into more of this. But I want to mention one that was the most interesting to me was the one Oscar film that won. Animated feature film, best animated feature film was Big Hero 6. And yes, there's arguments for Lego Movie should have been there and all that. Yes, Lego Movie was actually in the top 5. I think it was number 4 or 5. But Big Hero 6 was number 10. And it made $222.5 million. And it won, which was really, I thought, impressive for that film. But the other big winners of the Oscars that didn't make enough. Birdman, it won Best Picture and Best Direction, $42 million. Michael Keaton, Emma Stone, and Edward Norton were all nominated, but did not win. Still Alice, Julianne Moore won Best Actress in a Lead Role, and that made $18.7 million.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right? We'll get more. We're going to have a discussion about this in a minute. 2 more. Whiplash, J.K. Simmons won Best Actor in a Supporting Role, $14 million. Boyhood, Patricia Arquette won Best Actress in a Supporting Role, $25 million was the budget. So, this will get into our larger discussion now about the blockbuster superhero films and then the Oscar films that are considered the best films of the year. They don't make nearly as much as the movies that are the top revenue garners of the year. So what are your overall thoughts of this? I'll start with you, Agassi, please.
So, well, let me first of all ask you a question. So, did American Sniper get any Oscar wins?
Uh, American Sniper. It won Best Achievement in Sound Editing.
Okay, 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 okay. Um, man, I don't know. I mean, there's the obvious things, right? Well, I mean, so what are the obvious things? But positive things is, it's nice to see that you don't have to dump a ton of money into a movie to get an Oscar winner, or for an actor or for an actress. You don't have to. You don't have to pick as a project something that is this huge explosion-oriented movie, right? To win your Oscar, right? If that's the Super Bowl for actors and actresses, you can do a Julianne Moore and be in an $18.6 million grossing film and win your Best Actress award.
Sarah?
I'm not surprised by those numbers at all. I mean, I don't think any of us here were surprised
Yeah.
to know that. It's always interesting to break it down like that because there are movies that are really how should I put it, are like art house films, but those movies I think are geared for people who aren't just going to the theater to stuff their face with popcorn or to just have a good time and hang out with friends and like escape. And art house films are more, I think, introspective, and it's more about making a piece of art, and not necessarily entertainment.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why you have the ones that are made for entertainment purposes, those make them a lot of money, while the ones that are more focused on just making film and that can be looked back on and treasured for generations, fewer people see initially because a lot of times those movies end up having a life after they've been released too.
There's parts of me that agree with you, and I think overall thematically, we're in the same place. I would, I would, if I were saying it myself, I would. I, I'm not entirely with you if your statement is not. If the thing that you're not saying is also being accepted as a truism, meaning that the movies that are targeted towards entertainment are not art.
Oh, yeah, I know how that can be misinterpreted.
Okay. I mean, they are not as deeply introspectively artful as the other films, but I think there are definitely art. I feel like there are artistic elements, in them. I think actually to a certain extent, it's a harder thing to pull off, and that's one of the key reasons I am a Joss Whedon fan, is because I think he finds those little dither points in the timeline of a big AAA action flick to do something dramatic and artistic.
Right.
Versus a Michael Bay thing, which is just a chain reaction of explosions, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I to stay on the topic of money, why I can understand Big Hero 6 and Lego Movie kind of making big money. It's just all about the kids, pretty much. But why do movies like Eight Guardians, Jurassic, to me more current Jurassic World being one of the biggest movies this year, why do we pay for these big action movies? Sometimes they're really dumb. Not Jurassic World or those, but like in Expendables, for example. Like, why that movie doesn't make as much money as say a Jurassic World, but it makes a good amount for it to have. We're talking about Expendables 4 possibly. So why do we pay for these things when they're not as good per se as say The Martian, which thankfully is making a good amount of money.
Yeah, that's making a lot of money.
Which is good. I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
But in that case, I think it's because Matt Damon, the marketing's been great. Ridley Scott's tied to it. But yeah, I mean, you guys get the point. So Sarah, why do we pay for some of these movies? I know personally, I don't. In terms of like the really bad ones, like the silly, I don't know. I would prefer a superhero movie, or a really I'm attracted to a Steve Jobs or The Martian, a more sophisticated film. But that's me. But why do you think the majority of people pay for the other ones that are kind of just like those mind-numbing watches?
Nah, okay. So Jurassic World, if we're gonna start there, it had two things going for it. It had one, nostalgia. I mean, Jurassic World, I remember watching that as a kid. I mean, it was fun. Dinosaurs, they looked real. They were scary. And they had Chris Pratt. I mean, one of the biggest movie stars right now, coming off of the previous summer, leading a superhero film, Guardians of the Galaxy. That hit really big. So I think that combination led to the success that it had this summer. Now, why other films are as successful? Like, I wasn't expecting the Furious 8 this year, but then again, it had some things going for it. So I think I don't think anybody has truly ever figured out that magic movie formula to be successful. Well, maybe Michael Bay has, because all of his films are, and yet they're not that great. So yeah, those are my thoughts about it.
I guess, please.
Yeah, I don't know. I think part of it is risk, and it's really weird. I tried posting something that was trying to paint this picture in the staff chat today, and I don't think everybody quite picked up on what I was trying to say. But I write a lot and I talk a lot about kind of I guess what in the 21st century I would call the nerd's burden, right? There's Marvel and DC have assaulted us with a flurry of #1 issues in the last couple of weeks. All the video games are popping out in this holiday season, which they do every year. There's just a glut of AAA games that show up. Oscar bait season is in heavy rotation right now for movies. I mean, great Scott, this frickin' fall TV season it's literally a blitzkrieg on my senses, just trying to keep up with all of it. And of course, new phones and other things. So if you're a nerd and you're trying to consume all this stuff, we live in a world now where you've got to make tough choices, right? Sarah and I were talking a little bit in the pre-show about, blind spot. It's like, where do you, if you're a nerd, find the time to make that investment? What do you give up? For me, I'm giving up sleep, but that's only going to be able to last for so long.
That's a great show.
Right? Well, we won't get into that.
No. Yeah.
But my point is on this question, I think people, and I'll mainly say Americans, I think they're just risk averse. I think, if I have time to make it out to a movie theater on a Friday or Saturday, and I say, am I gonna spend my $11.50 and 2 hours of my life, watching, Julianne Moore in a locked room, single scene, single setting flick, or am I going to take the risk to go see Guardians of the Galaxy? I don't know those characters, but is there a higher likelihood that even if the movie's horrible, I'm going to still find some fun in it? And I think in America we default to going to see that big action. We default to going to see The Expendables, which is just a horrible financial decision for any human being to make.
Good thing I never made
it. But I think that's what we do.
Right. Yeah, I wanna. It kind of leads into the eventually the comments of Steven Spielberg a few weeks ago. I think it was middle of September about how eventually the superhero film is gonna go the way of the Western. It's not gonna happen anytime soon. We're slated for at least 3 Marvel movies for the next 10 years or so, and including DC movies sprinkled in. Uh, what will be the eventual end of the comic book film, and how long will it last? I guess because I'll start with you again.
Um, well, the first thing I'll say is that if it goes that way, it'll be because they do it to themselves. Um, that'll be the first thing. I think Marvel has, in my opinion, has the best chance at longevity, and that's not because I actually like DC comics more than Marvel, but I think the shtick that Marvel has of, and again, this is just my opinion, my perspective is of doing the genre movie and then saying, okay, now let's make that work with Captain America, right? Let's talk about a script for a great spy movie, and then make it about Captain America and Shield. Let's do a heist movie and put Ant-Man in it. Um, I would love to see them, if they do another Ghost Rider, I would love to see them. Hey, let's make a big car chase movie. Let's do Fast and Furious or whatever, but then let's put Ghost Rider in it. I think that's how you get a great Ghost. If they do that with the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider, I think that would be so awesome. But I think that's how they could pull it off. I think the danger, and I see this in Marvel, right? So they've got the best chance at longevity, but I'm also seeing the biggest risk is if they try to do the whole Marvel universe, right? They've got the cinematic universe, they've got shows on network TV, and then now they have shows on Netflix. Any of that has the potential to expand in a lot of different vectors. The risk to me is there's a certain level of, in my opinion, superhero character that you can get to that to me becomes disinteresting, right? That to me is like the show you don't need to make. Um, I I know some people would argue, but just to throw it out as an example, I don't know that Rocket Raccoon needs his own TV show.
Right.
Right, and somewhere in there is a depth point you hit where you've jumped the shark, and it becomes kind of like the great video game quality glut of the 1980s that almost completely that did for a number of years destroy the entire video game industry, where you're just putting out too much that's of too low quality, and it has a propagating effect that impacts not only the crud that you're putting out, but also starts to generate a level of disinterest for people to go consume the stuff that's actually good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it'll be more of like if it's not original enough and also overdoing it. I think, like, I agree. I think Marvel has done it really well. Where yes, they're invested both in film and television, where they've got Agents of Shield and then the Netflix series. But they're all so different. They're all in the same universe, but they all have like this unique world. It almost like they all feel like individual universes within the same larger world. Um, Daredevil is tonally dark, but then we're hearing Jessica Jones maybe darker. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing. And I just eventually I think it's just gonna be once it starts getting repetitive, then it's like okay, let's turn it off. It's over now. But for the time being, it's it's gonna be a long time. So Sarah, I wanted to ask what you thought of it and what Agassiz and I had to say about it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your guys' points. Is the Western dead? Because didn't Quentin Tarantino just come out with
Yeah.
Django Unchained and that did really well? Then he's coming out with The Hateful Eight, so he's
Yeah,
kind of revived that.
yeah, but
And I don't think it ever truly
I feel
truly
like he's
went.
the. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I never felt like it truly went away in a sense. And yeah, I think you were gonna say like I think he's the one person who could have done that, and in
Right.
a
I
good
mean,
way.
if you look at the history of westerns, right, and them being like super huge through the 50s and 60s,
Mhm.
Hmm.
and into the 70s, there was definitely well, maybe even a couple into the no, I would say into the late 70s, and then when you get into the 80s, you get this kind of, I guess what I would call this revisionist western. And again, I talk about this point where you jump a shark at the point where you're doing at the point where you're doing Young Guns, and
Hmm.
that's your western. Like that genre has fallen off into a bad place, and I think Quentin
Right.
Tarantino, and I like Young Guns, but those movies have problems if they're supposed to be representative of the Western genre. Um, but
Right.
oh, go ahead.
It's kind of like when in the 90s Batman and Robin was released and everybody thought Batman was done after that, and then Christopher Nolan reinvented Batman in a way we haven't seen before, and then you had The Dark Knight and how successful that was, and that just like led to what our current situation is with in terms of comic book movie genre and cinema. And I think the real test is going to be how we feel about it all in 2020, because I
Yeah.
believe that's the year, that's the end of the projected year right now for all these phases in both DC and Marvel have. And so within the next 5 years, the oversaturation
Yeah.
saturation between all of the TV shows versus all of the movies, and also by the end of that time, the characters we've really come to know throughout all these phases, a lot of them are probably, those actors are probably not going to be wanting to stick around much longer. Contracts might be up. So I think that's going to be really um, a true testament to see how long this can go on for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said that very well. But anyway,
I try.
um, I want to kind of, I want you guys to give a list, when we're not watching, this is not, we don't only watch Guardians and things like that. There's other movies to watch that are really good, and most of the time are our favorite movies ever. Where the other ones I know for me are more entertainment. The only superhero movie, quote unquote, that's in my like upper echelon is The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight. Other than that, I mean, the other ones don't. They're up there. It's exciting, but more entertainment. So I just want to give your, I guess I don't want to put a number on it, but just I guess rattle off some movies that when you're not watching a blockbuster or a superhero movie, uh, examples of movies that you would see that are coming out now, or movies that you've seen in the past year or two that really exemplify a really good film compared to going to see a really top budget movie. I'll start by saying for me recently, one movie I can think of that is just unbelievably, it's a masterpiece in my mind. I gave it a 10 when I reviewed it. Is the movie Frank with Michael Fassbender. It's on Netflix. It's one of those movies I never thought I would really like. It's sold as a dark comedy, and it is, but there is something really special at the end of that movie that just really took me by surprise. Um, and I had a personal tie-in with it. If you see it, I'd love to talk about it. But I think those smaller indie films are always overlooked, and when you watch them, they are so refreshing. They're tight. Um, they're real. It's weird to say real, but they're so grounded. Um, and it really gives you almost like an outlook on life in a way that you can never get with these fantastical movies, which is obvious. Which is why a movie like Ant-Man has such heart to it with what it does by staying grounded. Um, Frank is one that I saw recently that really was stunning. Um, that's the only one that really is on the top of my mind right now. But if I think of others, I'll mention them. But Sarah, what are some movies you've seen recently that I know? I think one of them will probably be what is it, the Earl and the Dying Girl one? I can't think of it, but that's
Me,
probably one of them
Earl,
for
and the
sure.
Dying Girl.
Yeah,
It
there we go.
rhymes. How don't you remember that?
But yeah, so like, what are some that you really think of?
Yeah, that one was the first one to come to mind just recently. I went through like a movie drought this past year, and I didn't really watch a whole lot of movies, but Whiplash. I saw. I was
Oh yeah.
so looking forward to that, and that movie did not disappoint. J.K. Simmons, I just bow down to you so much after that movie because you were always the dad from Juno, and then to see him in that role in Whiplash, it just blew my mind. And Miles Teller, I've been a fan of Miles Teller since I saw him in Rabbit Hole with Nicole Kidman, released like I think 2011, if I'm not mistaken. But I adore independent films partly because they are, now Amazon is releasing them while they're still in theaters on, so you can like pay about $7 to watch them while they're still in theaters, and I love that. So it's always cool for me to see something that I wouldn't be able to see for like months later. And like I discovered the film Take Care that was released way at the beginning of this year through Amazon, and it's a very small film. I mean, I'm talking like about 4 sets maybe, shot in New York, and it's just a very sweet movie about a relationship and the difficulties of having a relationship when the other person is sick and taking care of them, and that burden of being the caregiver. And it's such a sweet movie. I highly recommend it. But so I like those smaller movies, and for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, John, because they're refreshing and they feel authentic and real and just like a slice of life.
Yeah. I guess let's close it out for this, and then we're going to talk about a bigger topic to close out the show.
All right. So, when I inked this question, which came up, out of our top 5 list, one of the things I was thinking about first and foremost about was how these big movies are just these white knuckle experiences, right? One thing you mentioned, Jonathan, was how one movie that I can't remember, it's just like a 2-hour like single long like action shot, and it's just high adrenaline all the way through. That gets taxed. Like there are movies I walk out of physically exhausted. And so what I thought about when I was thinking about this question was, man, sometimes it's just like it's so nice to just sit down and just like watch a movie, and not get pulled in and made to feel like I'm on this roller coaster. For me, and my answers are not necessarily non-white knuckle experiences, but period films are a big thing. I really like films set with a very strong historical context. I was a history major in undergrad, so that's a big deal for me. It's nice if it's a period film that's more about like dramatic or theatrical historic events versus like a Last of the Mohicans or The Patriot or like another big action flick but set in a historical period. I'll say another big. What's that?
Based on historical events.
Yes. I'll say, another big thing for me is musicals. Right. As a history major in undergrad, but I had 2 offers for musical scholarships that I walked away from. So that would have been what I would be if I, hadn't done what I did otherwise. But so Les Mis, Les Miserables is the Hugh Jackman one I liked. I prefer the Liam Neeson one from like the 90s or whatever. But movies like that can definitely be like my I'm on a break movies, where I just don't need that white knuckle experience.
Yeah. And to close out, it's a bigger topic that maybe we could kind of maybe lead into future, another issue episode. But you wrote it as sexism in superhero films, but I wanna talk about that, but also expand it with not only sexism, but Sarah and I kind of spoke about it a little. I don't know if it was last week, but we kind of had this little back and forth on Twitter with some comments I made about that face.
That face.
So I want to extend it to sexuality and sexism in not only superhero movies, but also movies in general, and how they're handled and if they're handled properly or not, or just however, whatever you think of that topic in general. So, since I mentioned you, Sarah, start off. I guess maybe we could kind of go off of where we were talking about it. We just touched a very small part of it, but I think it's an important topic, especially now. A lot of people say it's 2015,
Right.
but yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking about the show Shameless because
Yeah.
you you got a crush on somebody. I'm forgetting his name. Cameron?
Cameron Moynihan.
Right, right. And he I knew him from this show, Showtime show called Shameless, which I highly recommend.
Yeah.
And don't judge me for recommending it because it is it is shameless. It lives up to its title, that's all I'll say. And in the show, he has a gay relationship, and it's really well done, and it's authentic, I thought, and it's very emotional, and it's not something I've seen, or it hasn't been that well portrayed, in my opinion, in comparison to other TV shows when they have those types of relationships within the series. So that's why we were talking about it. And I mean, you want, no matter who's in the relationship, you always want it to feel authentic and natural and
Yeah.
not forced.
Right.
And not so you're like, and to me, I was thinking about this a lot recently because of some of the shows I watch and some of the shipping I do. But for me personally, when I say forced, if I see the dialogue and as they're saying it, I'm like, well, of course they're going to kiss after that. I mean, it's clearly set up for that.
Yeah.
That isn't, to me, natural. That's the writing guiding the characters. To me, natural is like simple touches and small things between people that take place in a scene that has nothing to do with the quote-unquote romance or romantic storyline, but just the smaller moments within like a simple scene to for exposition purposes. That was a tangent. Wow. So
No, yeah.
yeah.
That's true. I mean, I'll go. I'll say my comments at the end, but I guess because I want to. She addressed the sexuality part. I mean, you could address it if you want, but you and I spoke about this at length during our Mad Max spoiler cast about the character of Furiosa and the usage of the women in that movie, and um, and again, you could use whatever movie or examples you would like, but it's definitely something that's worth discussing, which I'm glad we're talking about here.
I'm sorry, which part of the question did you want me to tackle?
Take either one. I mean, I thought Sarah did a great job with the sexuality part. If you want to talk about the sexism in films, go right ahead. It's all yours.
Yeah, I think the problem, I guess the problem that's cropping up these days, and the one that concerns me a little bit is, and I get it, like sexism is a problem in movies and TV, in industry. It has been for a long time. Um, what's concerning me is when I feel like there are efforts being made to break out of that, and 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 then there are instances where we as a society are not allowing for that opportunity, right? And it's kind of like I mentioned during the top five. Like I feel like the Scarlet Witch character. Yeah, yes, there are problems with movie posters, and there are problems with Scarlett Johansson being photoshopped so her waist looks 6 inches thinner than it is. Absolutely. There are problems with the fact that in a movie poster the female is always shot from the side, showing her profile so you can see all of her curves, whereas the guys are shot, from different angles. Um, but from a script perspective, and from a performance perspective and plot perspective, I don't feel like the areas, in Age of Ultron where they addressed her sexuality, I didn't feel like those were overly. Yes, they were contrived, but I just felt that they were instances that stay, I'll say statistically in terms of distribution of her screen time, are instances where her being a female and having physical attraction and desire for a male would naturally happen statistically. Some percentage of her time is spent in pursuit of, physical attraction, which I think is a very natural human thing. I think as a superhero, she's spot on, and she's one of the baddest asses on the Avengers in the film. And I'm like, a certain amount of the dialogue surrounding her and her performance and her where she fit in the plot, when the movie was in the theaters, I was like, guys, just let her be a superhero. Like, we don't have to, we don't have to pull her down, right? And even if there were, one time in the movie, again, I don't think that should, take away from, what that character is for the majority of the time that she's on screen, in my opinion. I think back to, Angel and, like, kind of what Charisma Carpenter's character was on Angel. There was a period of time where there was maybe more sexism, but as that character grew throughout the series, she became a very important part. Fred on Angel was a very important part that was not wholly centered around her sexuality. So I think I think there are instances where if we would give it an opportunity, that there are filmmakers, male filmmakers, who are trying to do right by female characters, and in some instances we're just not giving them the opportunity, even though they're trying.
Yeah. For me, I'll address the sexuality part of it. For me, it's personally, it's always nice to see when it's done in a way where the characters don't feel like they're some like they're outside of everybody else. I like it when they're seamlessly in it. Yes, they kind of make the point that they're in a relationship that you're not used to seeing, but at the same time, it's kind of made normal, which I hate to say, but that's what it's got until it's kind of more and more accepted, which has gotten to that point as time has gone on, and it's a lot better now. It's going to have to be done that way, and I think recently a really well done way that I've seen it done recently is actually not in a film, was in a video game, Tales of the Borderlands. It was one of their episodes, and it was a character, and she just like kind of picks up the phone. She gets a call. She's like, yeah, I love you, blah blah blah, and she was kind of being nervous about the whole thing, almost like you would be if you were around a stranger that you didn't know, and you're speaking to a loved one, and you're kind of trying to shy away from saying I love you to them. And she's like, oh, who was that? Oh, that's my girlfriend. It was a female, and a female speaking on the phone, and I thought it was just done so. It was just a nice small moment, but it was done in a way where it didn't seem like it was just outside of the character or outside of the world, and I think that's what it has to be. What has to be done. It has to be kind of, this is an actual relationship. This is not something that's weird or different. And I think that's why I want to get into Shameless, not only to see more of Cameron Moynihan, but also just to see how what Sarah was telling me about the relationship, how it's kind of you see the ups and downs like a male and a female would have, which is really nice to hear, and hope when eventually I'll see it. But any final thoughts of this show that you guys have, or we're good to kind of sign off?
One show that I think addresses both of these final topics in terms of sexism and sexuality is The 100. I don't know if either of you have watched that yet, but their lead character, Clark Griffin, is a female in a leadership role, and she's never criticized for being a female. Like, she's not looked down upon, or it's not absurd to have a female in that type of position, and she's a badass. And she also, in the first season, she has a heterosexual relationship, and then in the second one, she kisses a girl, and she explores that. And it's not cheesy. It's done very naturally, and people have their ships about it and their squabbles about it, but I appreciated it because her sexuality never never was made to be like a point in the show. It was in the background, and it just happened. And it never detracted from her overarching storyline. It just was a side thing, and so I really appreciated that, and I recommend that show.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I've heard of the show, but wow, cool.
And it's actually is that character the actress who is now on Fear the Walking Dead?
No, but the one she has the relationship with is, yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
yeah.
And my only comment was which we talked a little bit about Jamie Alexander because in reference to our conversation on Blind Spot again in the pre-show, and like I feel like she's a good, strong female character in the Thor flicks, and again, in the first movie she's pure warrior maiden. In the second movie, there's a bit of a plot device there where she is clearly attracted to Thor, clearly can't have him, and has to deal with that, right? So again, kind of shows a little bit of vulnerability in her attraction and desire of a male object. I don't have any problems referring to Chris Hemsworth as an object.
Nope, not wrong.
and and then having to contend with that, and I don't feel like that makes her character like subservient or subordinating her desires to those of a male. It's she wants somebody that she can't have, and she has to deal with that. I think dudes deal with that all the time. So I think it's okay for a woman to have to deal with it in a movie and still be a strong, warrior kind of oriented character.
All right. So where can people find you, Sarah?
You guys can find me on Twitter at SJBelmont, SJBELMONT.
Guess please.
Find me on Twitter at Agassicles, that's 2 S's in the middle, or under the same name on Google+.
Cool. I'm at Wordy Nerdy. You can see it here, hopefully. If not, it's WER, not O. And on Google+, plus John Reyes. Thanks for listening. This is our second episode. The next one will be toward the end of the month. It'll be our Halloween viewing episode, which we're really excited about doing. We still haven't decided on the film yet, but we'll discuss it, and we'll see you next time.